The morning started like any other, the kind of cool, crisp day where the sun hadn't fully climbed over the rooftops and the faint smell of dew clung to the air. My daughter Emily, only 12 years old, stood at the neighborhood bus stop with her backpack hanging off one shoulder, waiting patiently for the school bus. She was quiet and shy, by nature, the kind of child who never caused trouble and preferred to stay out of the spotlight. She clutched her folder of homework against her chest, shifting nervously as the minutes ticked by. But then came the sound that would change the course of the morning, a sharp, irritated voice cutting through the stillness. Karen. Every neighborhood has one, but ours had the worst. She was infamous for storming around, clipboard in hand, always sniffing out rules to enforce, always ready to start an argument over the most trivial of things. A mailbox painted the wrong shade, a lawn that was half an inch too long, a bicycle left leaning against a fence. But what she did that morning was more than pettiness, it was cruelty. Karen came marching down her driveway, like a soldier heading into battle, her face twisted into a mask of outrage. Emily saw her coming and instinctively stepped back, but Karen's voice lashed out first, sharp as a whip. "What do you think you're doing standing there? This is private property. You kids think you can loiter wherever you want." Emily, trembling, tried to explain softly that she was only waiting for the school bus, the same place the children had stood for years. But Karen wasn't listening. She leaned down, her face inches from my daughter's, her words dripping with venom as she accused her of trespassing and disrespecting homeowners. Emily's lip quivered, tears forming in her eyes, but before she could move, Karen reached out and grabbed her arm, yanking her backwards so hard that her backpack slipped off her shoulder and fell to the ground. Emily let out a frightened cry, stumbling as she tried to pull free, her little voice breaking as she begged Karen to let go. The other children at the bus stop froze in shock, too scared to intervene. And then, as quickly as it started, Karen shoved her backward, letting go with a smug smile that said she believed she had taught her a lesson. Emily cradled her arm, trying to be brave, but her tears betrayed her. That was when a neighbor across the street, Mr. Rodriguez, rushed out, shouting at Karen to back off. He pulled out his phone, recording everything, while Karen barked back at him to mind his own business. But this time, it wasn't just a petty HOA squabble. She had crossed into dangerous ground, and everyone knew it. Emily, shaking, tried to gather her things from the sidewalk, but her hands trembled so badly she could barely hold her folder. By the time I received the frantic call from Mr. Rodriguez and sped down the street, my daughter was in tears, standing helplessly beside the bus stop sign. And there stood Karen, arms folded, chin tilted upward as if she were proud of what she'd done, as though terrorizing a child was her right. When I pulled up, I didn't say a word at first. I just stepped between Karen and my daughter, pulling Emily into my arms and feeling the tremor of her sobs against my chest. My heart burned with a fury I hadn't felt in years, a protective instinct so strong it made my hands clench. Karen smirked, muttering something about parents needing to teach their kids better manners. That was the final straw. Right then and there, I made a silent vow. This wasn't going to be swept under the rug like her other antics. She could terrorize neighbors, scream about lawn care, bully families into silence. But she had chosen the wrong target when she laid her hands on my daughter. What Karen didn't realize as she strutted back toward her house, acting like she had won, was that she had just ignited a war she could never win. The hours after the bus stop incident felt like fire simmering beneath my skin, a rage that only grew stronger as I replayed Emily's tear-streaked face in my mind. I sat beside her at home, checking her arm for bruises while she tried to insist she was fine, though the redness where Karen had gripped her told a different story. My wife hovered close, her voice trembling with anger as she muttered that something had to be done before Karen went after someone else's child. I had dealt with people like Karen before, the self-appointed tyrants who thrived on intimidation and control, but she had never dared come so close to my family. Not until now. I kissed Emily's forehead, promised her that she wouldn't ever have to face Karen alone again, and then stood up with a decision burning in my chest. This wasn't just about scolding her or filing another useless HOA complaint. This was about accountability. I walked out the door with purpose, every step down the block fueled by the thought of my daughter's frightened eyes. When I reached Karen's house, I saw her standing smugly on her porch, phone in hand, no doubt bragging to one of her friends about how she had handled the situation. She spotted me and rolled her eyes, muttering something about overprotective parents. But the look in my eyes must have told her I wasn't here for casual talk. I stopped at the edge of her walkway, my voice low but steady as I told her she had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. She laughed, an arrogant, dismissive chuckle that grated against every nerve in my body. "Oh, please," she sneered, "your kid was trespassing," and I simply corrected her. "You should be thanking me." My fists clenched at my sides, but I forced myself to breathe, to remember that this wasn't about losing control, it was about justice. I told her plainly that if she ever touched my daughter again, she would face more than angry words, she would face the law. She scoffed, waving her hand as if my threat was empty, and then did the one thing that sealed her fate. She stepped closer, jabbing her finger into my chest as she hissed that people like me didn't belong in this neighborhood anyway, that she would make sure our family learned our place. That was it. My patience shattered, but not into reckless violence, into calculated resolve. I pulled out my badge and ID, the gold shield catching the sunlight. As her smirk faltered for the first time, her eyes widened, her confidence slipping as I calmly told her that I wasn't just a parent, I was the police chief of this county, and what she had done to my daughter was assault. The porch seemed to tilt beneath her as her bravado cracked, but I didn't stop there. I leaned in close enough for her to hear the steel in my voice and told her that witnesses had already reported what she'd done, that there was footage, and that her smug little reign of terror over the neighborhood was officially over. She stammered, her face pale, muttering excuses about discipline and rules, but I cut her off with a raised hand. "Rules don't give you the right to put your hands on children," I said coldly. "And now, Karen, you'll answer for it." With that, I turned on my heel, leaving her sputtering on her porch as neighbors peeked from their windows and doorways, whispering about what they had just seen. For the first time in years, Karen wasn't strutting with power, she was shrinking with fear. And I knew this was only the beginning, because what came next would be her downfall. The morning after our confrontation, I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing with messages from neighbors who had finally found their courage. Screenshots, videos, and statements poured in. Karen yelling at children for riding bikes on the sidewalk, harassing delivery drivers, even threatening to fine families for lawn decorations that weren't up to community standards. Each file was a nail in the coffin she had built for herself. I compiled everything carefully, every witness account, every piece of footage, and by noon I had a case file thicker than the HOA's own rulebook. But I didn't stop there. I called the HOA board directly and requested an emergency meeting, this time not as a homeowner, but as the police chief whose child had been assaulted. When I walked into the clubhouse that evening, every seat was full, neighbors whispering nervously. Karen perched at the head of the table with her usual smugness, trying to act as if she still had control. She barely glanced at me before launching into her rehearsed tirade, claiming Emily had been a disruption and that I was harassing her. But before she could get into full swing, I set the thick folder of evidence on the table with a heavy thud that silenced the room. I opened it and began to read aloud, not my words, but the words of our neighbors, people who had been silent for too long. Their testimonies filled the room like a tidal wave, each one stripping away another layer of her arrogance. Karen's confident smirk began to twitch, her eyes darting nervously as the walls closed in around her. Then came the final blow. I played the security footage from a neighbor's door camera showing Karen grabbing Emily's arm at the bus stop. Gasps erupted from the crowd, parents covering their mouths in shock, others muttering angrily under their breath. Karen sputtered, claiming the footage was taken out of context, but it was too late. The evidence was undeniable. I turned to the board and formally stated that I would be pressing charges against Karen for assaulting a minor with multiple witness statements and video evidence to back it up. The room went dead quiet as the weight of my words settled. The HOA lawyer, who had been sitting stiffly at the end of the table, suddenly closed his briefcase, stood up, and walked out without a word, clearly unwilling to defend the indefensible. The board members, pale and shaken, announced they would be stripping Karen of her position effective immediately, and murmurs of relief spread across the room. Karen, trembling now, tried one last desperate plea, shouting that this was a setup, that everyone was against her, but no one listened. For the first time, the neighborhood she had bullied for years stood united, not in fear, but in defiance. As officers escorted her out of the clubhouse, I caught Emily's eyes in the crowd, bright, safe, and free from fear, and I knew we had won. From that day forward, the neighborhood felt lighter, laughter returning to the streets, children playing without the shadow of her tyranny looming over them. Karen had spent years trying to control everyone else, but in the end, her downfall came from the very community she thought she owned. And as for me, I didn't just protect my daughter, I made sure no parent in our neighborhood would ever have to face a Karen like that again.